You're listening to We Are STS, a podcast from the Department of Science and Technology Studies at University College London. Hi, everybody. Welcome to We Are STS, and welcome to UCL. I'm your host, Professor Joe Kane. Today, we're talking with an alumnus from one of our undergraduate programs. Isobel Lim graduated with a BSc in Sociology and Politics of Science in 2022. She's since gone off to do lots of things. We got a chance to catch up with her recently as she passed through London. I'm always interested in what happened next when it comes to our former students. Some go straight into master's degrees or other programs. Some jump into the world of work. Some just take some time off to break the routine of having been a student. STS graduates go off in a lot of different directions. Of course, that's frustrating for us when we try to explain careers to people looking at the program. But not being able to be clear sometimes is tremendously liberating. We call our career strategy Flexible Futures. It's designed to work for people who have specific ideas looking ahead, who have general ideas looking ahead, and who have pretty much no idea for what they want to do down the line. One thing we know for sure about the future, though, is that being flexible is going to offer a distinct advantage. Isobel was a student with some general ideas about her future when she studied with us, and she had a lot of advice to do traditional routes that, I think just didn't really appeal to her. So, what did she do? You're going to hear about that in just a minute, and I think some of it will surprise you. For me, talking with Isobel about what she was thinking helps really explain one particular essay she wrote for me that caught me completely by surprise. How did she do that? Well, just stay tuned. Let's hear Isobel talk about life after STS. We start our conversation with me asking Isobel simply to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Isobel. I'm originally from Singapore. I graduated from Sociology and Politics of Science back in 2022.
It seems like it was so long ago, but it's just a couple of years ago.
It feels like that, but I entered undergrad 6 years ago, so it feels a lot longer.
Yeah, and you went through the pandemic and all that kind of stuff. So you're a person who experienced really the university at a very unusual moment.
Definitely, because I would say my most normal experience of UCL is the first 6 months in my first year in 2019 to 2020. My second year was entirely online because of the pandemic. I had classes at 1 a.m. local time for me. And even in third year, it was still of regulations. I remember there was so many risk assessments we had to do for societies. And even coming into class, we had to wear masks. It wasn't very interactive. And because people were still kind of jittery and scared of COVID, everyone just went home. So there was no socializing.
Let's talk more generally about your time at the university. So you studied Sociology and Politics of Science, one of our undergraduate degrees, but you did a lot more than that. So what do you remember of the stuff that you did?
So outside of my degree, I was really involved in Model United Nations. That I kind of wanted to be a diplomat for a very long time. Clearly did not happen anymore, but I really enjoyed my time in that society because it allowed me to meet a lot of very different people from very different backgrounds. I think the whole idea of having to role play a certain country that may not necessarily agree with your personal beliefs is something that I think is quite important in creating empathy and at least understanding things from a different perspective, which ties in very nicely with what I was learning in my degree, which was kind of a more holistic approach, I think, and seeing why governments or certain groups of individuals choose to do the things that they do.
When you came to UCL, you were coming from Singapore, is that correct?
Yes, but I was in a British school for most of my life. So I thought I was quite prepared, but I was still getting culture shocks every day when I was in UCL.
Can you think of an example of a culture shock and what we did about it?
I remember that in Singapore, we don't do small talk. I remember coming to UCL, I thought I was quite social, but I felt like I was definitely like introvert compared to like a lot of the Western students. So I think just coming out of the comfort zone and talking to them, I think just being able to tell them that I speak English too and be able to talk to like the Eastern students who probably don't speak English very well, I speak your language as well.
So it's going across those different language groups all the time. It's funny that you say you don't really do small talk, because I think of you particularly as a person with great social skills. You really have no trouble walking into a room and having conversations with just about anybody.
Well, thank you. And that's because I was at 3 years of UCL trained me for that.
Great. And we got the UCL promotion.
It is. It's a pretty nice name to have as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's talk about you now. So you finished university. Tell us what happened next.
So when I graduated from UCL, I did my dissertation on Pokemon Go, which I think is quite well known in the department on what it is. And from that dissertation, I got a job in a tech startup in Indonesia because my mom's originally from there. I worked there for about 2 years in the collectibles and esports sector. So collectibles as in figurines, Pokemon cards, like trading cards. There's a very large market for that in Southeast Asia, especially among the very well-to-do people. I have handled cards that probably can bring in like five digits.
Wow.
Yeah, just holding it in my hand. It's just, I felt like, oh, if I did anything wrong to it, that's my annual paycheck out of the window. Yeah. And so I was in that role for 2 years. And there was a bit of a transition towards like cryptocurrency, which is a bit of a gray area in terms of like regulations in my home country, Singapore, and everywhere else that I want to work in. So I decided that maybe it's time to look for greener pastures. And I ended up working in esports because I have always liked video games a lot. I wrote a couple of my essays in STS on video games too. I wrote one about how the military uses video games in Brian Balmer's module, Science, Warfare, and Peace. And obviously my dissertation was literally the case study was on Pokemon Go. And I went to all the live Pokemon events, which is something that became a really big boom over COVID. So previously, it was always only in America, and they are lucky if you get 300 attendees. But the most recent event that they held in Excel London, actually, this past February, had 1,400 attendees for just the video games itself, and it has 4 games. So across the board, there's probably at least 5,000 people in attendance.
That's extraordinary. So some of the people who listen to the podcasts are like me, really old, and we don't understand the world. So what is an e-sport, and how does it connect to Pokemon?
So basically, if you think in terms of traditional sports, football, basketball, you think of that, but in a video game aspect. So traditional sports are very well established. There's kind of a routine. There's kind of an expectation that everyone has, right? Esports is kind of like a young and growing market. So there's a lot of things they try to adapt from traditional sports to make it kind of more of a bigger spectacles. Esports is kind of like the new 21st century thing. They had a very big boom back in 2017 to 2019. But the bubble kind of popped because there was a lot of fund mismanagement. So right now there's a lot of money, there's a lot of interest from the Middle East and from crypto in trying to keep the market afloat. So in terms of Pokemon, traditionally they've always done like the console games and the trading cards in terms for their esports. So it was kind of like a more niche market. You couldn't really make a living out of it. People kind of made fun of you for doing that. It was a very small niche hobby. But recently with the introduction of Pokemon Go and Pokemon Unite, so Pokemon Go is the game you have on your phone. You just catch Pokemon and it's based on like location based. And Unite is basically League of Legends, but Pokemon and on a 10 minutes countdown timer. That was the Pokemon's like official entry into like what people perceive as a more established esport game.
Right.
So they introduced both of that in 2022 when I graduated from college. And the event that was first held at was in London. So I got to witness that live for its very first time. And so with the introduction of those 2 games and with COVID allowing people to have more time to kind of explore this, it had created like a huge amount of demand for an interest to the point that now that people have to limit tickets like sell out for the Masters division, which is everyone that's not young. It sells out literally within like the first few minutes. Back in the day, you could literally enter the competition last minute, because there's still sports available. But now, because this, in terms of crowd control, it's just a bit too difficult.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the main reason why it got such a boom is because the 2 latest game added, you can play on your mobile phones, which makes the barrier of entry a lot lower compared to the other games, which requires a bit more monetary investment in terms of keeping up, buying the games, buying the cards. The set changes like every few months. So having to invest in that was just something that was a big deterrence for a lot of people.
Right. And so at one of the tournaments, how many people would be there in the audience?
Well, we have to buy spectator passes to be able to enter the competitive venue. And back in the day, in 2022, it was very easy to get the spectator pass. You can go onto a website, maybe go like a few days later, still get the tickets. But they started introducing a lottery system.
Right.
Because they held an event in Japan, and Japan loves to do gacha, and they love to randomize everything. And it was something they kind of carried forward to the event that they held in Honolulu in 2024. And even with the those are basically like the Premier League finals equivalent, even for the ones that are kind of like a tier below, getting tickets is not as easy anymore because we have to sign up and the website can't handle the volume of people that are trying to get in.
Right. And so do you think, you keep talking about Japan and Singapore and versus, say, London. How does London compare in the esports world? Is it a serious venue or is it do you think of it as like an appendix to the real action, which is happening in Asia?
Well, I think the biggest spectacles are definitely still in Asia and the US. I think the UK is kind of like an underdeveloped field.
Right.
It's definitely a place where there's a lot of room to grow. And I think the UK is taking steps in terms of some colleges are introducing degrees which specialize in esports. And I think I recently heard they also had a minister for esports, so that definitely shows they are trying to make it a bit more of an initiative. And I know the League of Legends finals was held in the O2 Arena.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, last year.
Which is a huge arena. It's larger than, say, American basketball or some of the other stadium sports. This is serious business, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, definitely. I think the way they have made it to come with spectacles, like at least when we look in terms of like League of Legends, there's definitely a peak of what esport can be. It had concerts before the actual game started, and they filmed like promotional videos of all the players to drum up hype, to make it very exciting. And the players come out like a walkway similar to how like footballers would come running out into the field. So I think it's definitely very interesting to see how they kind of taken stuff from traditional sports and tried to adapt it into a player base whose characters and personalities are very different from how you would see footballers in terms of celebrities.
Right. So the players are celebrities. The events are spectator events. The money is huge. What do you do in this business?
So in this business, what I did mostly in terms of my experience is that I did a lot of data analytics. I crunched out a lot of the numbers that came out from these events to see what's useful, is there any trends that we can take from it, or if there's any precautions that we have to keep in mind for future events. Because one thing that's quite important, especially when the events grow to this amount of size, is crowd control.
Right.
And I would actually say that the West is a lot better in terms of crowd control compared to the East.
Right.
A lot of Eastern countries, they require very tight crowd control. If not, it creates a lot of issues because there's a lot of confined spaces. And a lot of people, when they don't really know what to do, they kind of like panic. And that creates a whole chain reaction. I think in general, a lot of the venues that people use in the West tend to be a lot larger. And they tend to be a bit more controlled. Definitely, which I think is a very interesting thing to notice.
I mean, since we're in STS and we're thinking about how science and technology are shaped by society, I mean, there is a whole research industry of crowd control, large crowd gatherings, and that kind of stuff. But there's also an evolution of manners and customs, isn't it? So you see the old films, say in the 1950s and 60s of, say, rock and roll events, and everybody's just sitting there, and you think that's unexpected, really, isn't it? But those things have a history, but they also have a sociology, don't they? So you're watching the business grow and you're thinking about things like, as the crowds grow, what do we do? Not only how do we make sure everybody's safe, but also things like, how do we monetize this a little bit better? How do we engage the fans? Do they leave with something? All that kind of stuff. But what did you like about doing all that? What made you happy?
I think it's just because I really like playing video games. I never thought it would be like a feasible career, at least growing up, especially in Asia. But to see there's like a lot more things that you can do in the sphere as opposed to being like an esports player itself, and just being able to support those who play, I think it's a really great thing, because in all of the esports, whether it's even individual or team, you need to have a community around you to be able to just watch out for your back, be able to protect you, and just support. And I think that's what going to these live events, that's the best part about it, because some of these friends, you only get to see them at the events. I think that creates a very unique kind of community in terms of people being literally from everywhere and being able to meet up maybe for a few weeks at these events. And I think what was really interesting for me was that, I thought STS was I had a great time at STS. I love everything I studied in it. And it was a very broad degree, so I didn't see how it was going to be applicable for my career. But what I realized is that a lot of the theories we learn in terms of why do people act in a certain way, what things influence people's decisions, that actually really help in not just esports, but in general work culture, being able to manage people and understanding why people try to do things in a certain way, or like how do you best manage to get yourself out of sticky situations, or how do you maximize a situation. One of the things that I learned from STS that I thought was quite interesting was that I remember a couple of my professors were always talking about, sometimes you have to gauge the level of enthusiasm from a party that's trying to offer you something. And that's something you think that you will learn in maybe a business degree or whatnot, but it's something you learn at STS as well, because it kind of explain the reasoning behind that based on using the culture, the history, or to that particular field. So I think being able to manage someone's enthusiasm and then just being able to pick up on things they say, like, oh, they're from this industry, this is the thing they kind of aspire to be. It's like, okay, is this fully my benefit, or is it some kind of benefit the person is trying to be able to obtain as well? And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think it's just being able to manage whether it's a equal kind of benefit or whether one party is benefiting more from it.
Right. So that engagement model where there's two interactors in a relationship, and you got to understand what the other person is bringing to the conversation. Because some people, they have a lot of reasons to want to come interact with you. And so the theory is you got to pay attention to both sides here. And that's a good point. Do you refer back to your undergraduate days, your undergraduate studies in your career now?
Well, I definitely think about it in very happy memories. I think the degree is a very good conversation opener. I think there's a lot of people, especially the older generation, may not be exposed to what kind of degree this is, or why is it important for us to study. I think be able to explain to people how science communication and the theories you learn in terms, you think of scientists, you think they're probably a bit introverted. The way they explain things is very to the point, there's nothing, they don't tell us why we should care about the science. But science communication, as SCH tells us, is really important to create a narrative to get people engaged, to show them why they care. And that's the same thing in esports, because a lot of times, the reason why esports is very difficult to monetize is because you don't make the fans care enough about the players. So I think being able to communicate why is it so important, why is the journey of this team so important, what makes them different from the other teams, I think be able to communicate it in a very engaging way is something I kind of adapted from my degree in STS.
Right. So that's fantastic. So the basic principles of science communication can be part of the basic principles of esport communication. That's a really great idea. The last kind of question I want to ask is about, you mentioned how you talk about your degree now. So what advice would you give to somebody who's thinking about university and they're wondering, well, there's this degree, which is a bit weird, and then there's a traditional degree like sociology or politics. Mm-hmm. What would you say to draw them into something like sociology and politics of science?
I think in terms of a degree that is offered in STS, I think the biggest draw for me is that it's an interdisciplinary degree that forces you in a way to kind of make interlinks between two traditional mediums that probably don't really connect. Like if you think sociology, you think about science policy, like how on earth does that connect? But I think all of the modules in this degree kind of makes you think outside the box and try to find trends and patterns that are very commonplace. And I think that's very important in terms of when you're writing an essay, you're trying to find a bunch of different evidence, right? But you have to find what links all those evidence together. Same in your work, when you're looking at a lot of data, you kind of have to find how does all this data correlate together. I think a degree in STS actually really influences the way you think. I think that's the most important thing that you carry forward, because nowadays for undergrad, it doesn't really matter unless you're doing a more specialized field. But I think what's important for universities being able to shape the way you think and being able to find trends and patterns and correlations. And I think the way the module is set up, it really facilitates that very well. Because if you told me that I was going to be working in esports but I was doing a degree on sociology and also like science policy and tech, I wouldn't have been able to make the link. But now, at least like from learning all my different degrees and just being made to write essays in a certain way or forced to discuss ideas in a specific way has really opened up my mind, seeing how all these different fields be linked under like a common umbrella or at least a common theme.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fantastic. The way I see your trajectory is that you were passionately interested in something before you came to university. You stayed passionately interested in that. And then you found ways for your degree to kind of be a wrapper around your passions. And maybe it makes your passions just a little bit better, or maybe it gives you a way to put your passions into the workplace. And so you can be in the world of Pokemon and then move into esports and stay there, but also draw in your degree and make the best use of both. And I think I see you as a person who's balanced that kind of university training, but also all those passions that you've got in the world. And that to me is the best outcome in the world, because I don't think we turned you into a sociologist, but I think you found ways to take sociology and politics and put it to work to do the things that you love to do. Do you think I have that about right?
Yeah, I think that's a very nice way of putting it. I think having like pre-existing interests or having an interest outside of your degree is very important, because nowadays like jobs and roles are so flexible that there's always like somewhere you can kind of marry the two together.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that's fantastic. So let's bring it to an end. Thanks very much for being here, Isobel, and thanks for coming back and visiting us here in STS.
Thank you. It's always lovely to come back.
Esports, are you kidding me? Is that really a thing? Well, you bet it is. It's strong in Asia and the Pacific. It's growing fast in Europe. Sounds like Isobel is right at the heart of things in that industry. And she's finding ways to make use of sociology and politics of science as she moves through that business. I like what Isobel said about interdisciplinarity. That describes STS in a big way. Each year we have students bring together pieces from all sorts of subjects, things you'd never expect to come together, and they create new things, new ideas, new possibilities. We've been doing that here in STS for over 100 years, folks, and it still keeps going strong. If you know someone interested in the things we do here in STS, just ask them to get in touch. Maybe it's to explore esports as an example of sports science. Or maybe it's to study the science of crowd behavior. Or maybe player psychology. Or maybe just how engagement of fans changes the dynamics of play. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the history of science interacting with sports and really changing the game. These all fit under the umbrella of Science and Technology Studies, or STS. We're a thriving community here at UCL, and there's always room for more. Super big thanks to Isobel Lim for doing the interview. She stopped in just to say hello. Next thing she knew, we had her in the studio recording. Brilliant adaptability. I'm so proud of you. Music today included Rollin' at 5 by Kevin MacLeod. It's available online at incompetech.com. WeAreSTS is a production of the Department of Science and Technology Studies here at University College London. If you want to find out more about the show, listen to past episodes, or give us some feedback, just visit us online. Here's the address. It's ucl.ac.uk/STS/podcast. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for listening. We're going to take a break for a little while we reset for the next season. I also have a few months research leave coming up, so I'll be off to do that with my academic hat on. But don't worry, we'll be back soon enough. Until we do, just remember, there's knowledge to be found just about everywhere, and that together we are STS. Bye now. You've been listening to We Are STS, a podcast from the Department of Science and Technology Studies at University College London. Subscribe to the show and join us online. The address? ucl.ac.uk/STS/podcast.